cylinder.
Yep.
Once you map a geometric object
Sorry,
to
my
it, you
stream
can
keeps
perform geometry on
dropping.
it, figure out what's its center
I
line,
have
what's its center
now
point, all that stuff. It's perpendicular
on my
to
screen,
the
it's
top
gonna
of the
say
vase,
whether it's
perfectly
live
within
or not.
1/1000th of an inch.
Wow.
It looks
then-
tiny
and
though,
then
but
Basically, the
maybe
top
we'll
is
see
really
it.
even.
Well, it is super even, but now you've got, think of it, now this vase, we've defined an like a horizontal axis and a vertical axis.
Yeah.
Now we can go and map geometric shapes to other parts of the vase, the cylinders to the lug handles, cones to part of the vase body, or a sphere to part of the vase body.
I just want to make it like digestible, because I heard you talk about this before. And so just for that top part, basically, if we assume the bottom is flat, the top is almost perfectly parallel to the bottom or the ground it's sitting on. That's what you're trying to say.
So
in terms of precision, right?
Perpendicular and parallelism.
Perpendicular is when this
Perpendicular is the T,
fake
90
that
degrees.
you guys are doing. But I'm just trying to explain like how flat the top is, and that's why it's so impressive.
Well, it's flat. I think if you go to the first one, it's flat within like 0.004 of an inch or something. It's insane. Like it's.
And then no ancient tools as we know them would be
You
able to do
couldn't.
that.
You
need a level with like.
The point of this is this is so far beyond the realms of some dude banging on it with a rock or grinding on it with sand and a stone, which is how they say they were made.
And
it's impossible to explain this with hand tools.
But this is the thing that's so interesting to me, is that like there's this sophistication bestowed upon a quite meaningless object.
Right.
Right?
It's a whole other thing.
A pyramid is different.
And 50,000 of them.
It is.
And 50,000 of them.
Yes.
So you need to be able to replicate that.
Maybe they have
over
factories.
and over and over again. Now we're talking.
There's an industrial process
Yo,
at pointing, and so there's a
buddy,
longer
what up,
discussion
man?
you get into about the relationship between precision and function. You only develop this type of ability to
What up,
work
Mooney?
in these
Glad you're
precise
here, man.
measures if you are getting a functional return.
God.
Think about it this way.
I have the thing here,
and then once you
but
have that capability, right,
if
your
my stream goes
manufacturing
down, do let
capability
me
can
know.
be
I
very
know
precise.
I'm not
You
like,
can then
I don't
apply
always
it to
have do
everything,
that,
right?
but-
So I think there were functional objects. Some of these, either it's the sites, might be the pyramids, might be these giant bloody boxes that are underground everywhere.
Yeah.
I think a lot of that seemed to show the same type of precision. I think they had a functional purpose. I think that's why they developed this level of precision. But then they just applied that manufacturing process to everything. Think about, like, have you ever owned a car from the 60s?
Yeah.
Like, fucking, you have to turn the wheel this far to make it actually the wheels before they start to turn, and the panel gaps are wide, and the rain gets let in, and cars today, they're beautiful, they're all put together. We don't need that, but our manufacturing capabilities has robotics.
Have been
and
refined.
Much better. That precision in manufacturing gets applied, and I think that's what we're looking at here. I actually think there may be functional purposes for these things. They could have acoustic properties. There might have been parts of other machines. We don't know. That's the other crazy part about this, is like, it's the temptation is always there to look at us and say, how would we do
A vase to us is not a vase to them.
It might not
be more than art.
Exactly.
It might be, It might be something else.
Here's a question I have for asking for a frame of reference. This civilization was much more advanced than we were up until recently. Around what time did our modern civilization become as advanced as they were, if at all?
No, I think so. We could do, if we put the time and effort and money and resources to it, I think we could replicate a lot of this stuff. We haven't ever done it. It's too expensive. It's like no one's got the backbone or the resources to do it. That's not to say we couldn't do it.
Well,
I think our technology, I think, is different. I think when you look back at technology, think about, like, you talked about the progression of technology over a couple hundred years, right? We've gone down this electromechanical route of how we work and the world works. The temptation is there to then apply that to the past. But think of, like, in 50 years, 100 years, 1,000 years, we're going to know so much more about all these other realms of science and technology. I just think some of the answers and the paths that this civilization may have taken could be outside of our current understanding or perspective. I think they may have taken different routes. Their technology might have been very different. So it becomes really hard to kind of guess at what it is.
And we have to assume that because there's no evidence of the electromechanical technology.
Well, yeah, there's nothing, like, there's no computers, there's the whole where are the tools argument is one that gets raised all the time.
And that's a reasonable fucking argument.
It is.
It's like you've got these things that can't be made with these ancient tools.
The ones we found.
The ones we found. So where are the fucking tools? And I think you hear this a lot of times with, like, the skepticism about ancient civilizations. It's like, okay, well, where they live, where are the homes, where are all these things? These are good questions.
They are.
I think that we should be asking these questions, and I think it's good that you don't get defensive about those things.
I think. Yeah, and they're valid questions, and I think there's a lot of... We haven't looked in a lot of the places where I think this stuff's going to be, for starters, and I also... Well,
where do you think it's going to be?
Well, I think Graham Hancock makes a great point about this, but it's like sea levels rose 400 feet all over the world. There's like 10 million square miles of land that went under that would have been coastal and inhabited during these periods when the sea levels were far lower. We don't look at that stuff. Marine archaeology is 100% focused on shipwrecks. We don't look in these places. Like the Amazon, we're thanks to deforestation in the Amazon, we're finding the remnants of cities.
Thanks to it, yeah.
Well, thanks to one good thing.
Yeah.
One good thing of all that. We're finding the remnants of cities that have no place in the story of history.
Yeah.
But they're the size of like London in the 1800s, and there's hundreds of them. Like, we have no clue where that's coming from.
They're finding these massive pyramids still. I think the biggest one they've ever found is La Danta in Guatemala, I believe.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I thought the biggest one by mass might have been Cholula, but yeah.
Oh yeah, that was the one that was also in the.
It's in Mexico.
Yeah, Cholula, Mexico.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is just fascinating to see it. Like how much is covered up.
Yeah.
I mean, if you even see like where are the pyramids outside of Mexico City? What are those?
The Temple of the Pyramid of the Sun and the Moon. It's I've forgotten the name of the...
whatever. I went over there, and they showed images before they started scooping out all the land and everything. They just look like mountains. How many mountains, how many hills exist right now that little kids are playing on top of?
Could be a stone structure.
That their fucking houses built on top of that are actual old pyramids. They say that thing about one in, I think, Albania.
Yes, that one's disputed.
It's disputed.
Bosnia, you mean?
Yeah,
Bosnia, yeah.
So I personally think that's a natural formation. There's not to say that there's not tunnels. There are tunnels and structures in it, but that one, you always see it from that one angle.
And it's just
the one
like
picture. Get on Google Earth and spin around. You're like, oh, this is just part of the end of a mountain range.
Yeah.
But there are pyramids all over China. This exact like this. They literally have been deliberately planting over them since the 80s.
Dude,
I mean,
if
trees and hills now. It's just that they're pyramids.
If we assume that the Sahara back then was completely lush, if it looked like the Amazon, if that's true, right? How many cities, pyramids, other megalithic structures are just covered in sand dunes?
Could be tons. They literally, even today, archaeologists and Egyptologists will tell you 70 to 85% of ancient Egypt is still buried beneath the sand.
I mean, think how big they needed to make the pyramids for us to even see the tips of them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just the tips of the fucking pyramids and barely the head popping up of the Sphinx.
Yeah.
That's how massive it had to be to weather, thousands of years.
Well, yeah. I mean, at least thousands of years, potentially a lot longer. It's
because those dunes shift around too, right?
They do. Well, in fact, you can. I know guys that bank on that. You actually go and, as the dunes shift, you kind of every few years you might go and look at the area between the dunes because it's kind of uncovering more ground, and you go and find like arrow stone, tips and arrow points and heads and stuff. Yeah. So there's a lot of parts of the world we haven't looked. A lot of the areas there was a lot of devastation. I think it's hard to comprehend just how much, with the end of the Younger Dryas, like the sediment layers, like stuff might be buried at the bottom of the ocean under hundreds of feet of water, but under 200 feet of sediment as well.
Which one is this one?
That's the Pyramid of the Sun, I think. It's Teotihuacan, yeah.
Teotihuacan.
So this is the one in Mexico City, right?
Yep.
I mean, look at how it looked.
Yeah, there's the Sphinx's head sticking out as well, yeah.
I don't even believe in mountains anymore.
It might not be.
It's crazy.
Some people think there's a pyramid in Antarctica.
Oh, you showed me that crater impact. We do know that there was a massive crater impact, right?
Yeah, probably many.
Yeah, it's probably been tons over the years.
So I'm curious, why is the pyramid so significant? Why has it been replicated by every culture?
I don't know. It's a very significant thing, though, isn't it? It seems to be. I mean, a lot of the arguments that the mainstream uses is what they call it's like cultural coincidence, or it's like people all around the world solve the problem the same ways. I think a lot of that's nonsense when it comes to megalithic building. It's like you're literally choosing the hardest and most difficult way to do something.
But like fire, every culture develops fire.
Yeah, fire or napping and making a spear.
Right, and that's all coincidence.
That's not. Yeah, that's all we're solving this particular problem.
Right.
And what about the wheel?
We can apply it to this.
That happened around the world around the same time, right?
Yeah, more or less. People got there. Yeah, I mean, it's just that's.
I mean, the pyramid thing, like everybody developing a pyramid at the same time, doesn't really strike me as the most peculiar thing, because that's just how you would build something, right? You can't build straight up; it falls over. It's also very difficult to build straight up. So we just build in this kind of like what are they called? The step
mastaba. So it started the way they describe it. It's like, well, we started by digging a hole and burying people in that, and then we started. You know what? We'll build a little mound over the top of the hole. and then became this step structure. We called a mastaba, like a platform.
Yeah.
And you know what? We'll start stacking these mastabas.
And then you see
as
that in
get the
Central
steps,
America.
That's this shape.
And South America, where they're like these pyramid structures built on top of pyramid structures.
Right.
Which makes it much easier to build because now you're not redoing this foundation, you're just kind of building on top of it.
Yeah.
And they've become massive.
It's strange, though. I don't buy in a lot of ways the tomb theory with this stuff, too. It's like, I had a conversation with someone recently that said, you know, the easiest way and tons of less effort is if you really want to hide a burial tomb for someone is you dig down into the ground and then once you're done, you collapse it all in after you. It's so much less work than building a giant pyramid and trying to bury someone in there and hope that no one's ever going to get into it. It's not the most efficient way.
Oh, was the idea that the pyramid would provide protection for the person
It's
buried
supposed to,
inside?
well, it's a monument, and then, yeah, it's supposed to, like, stop tomb robbers from getting... That's what that goes with the tomb theory, which I don't think these were tombs. There's fuck all evidence that these big ones were tombs. Some of them were used later on, undoubtedly, as tombs and repurposed that way, but not these ones. The big ones, I don't even think the dynastic Egyptians got into them, frankly. I think they couldn't get into them. Because I think we'd see a lot more evidence of it if they did.
You don't think they could because of just the sand, like, just block the openings?
I mean, you got to imagine, like, when these things were covered in the casing stones, it's super white. It would have, like, reflected the sun like a mirror, and there's no visible joins.
Cool.
You cannot pry those stones out. There's no obvious entrance to it. You know, it's really difficult to look at that. The top of the middle one still has some of those casing stones that are weathered over time. But can you imagine these just perfect
If it's
white
not
pyramids? They're just like,
I know.
If it's not a tomb,
this desert needs some giant triangles.
if it's not a tomb, what would you conjecture is the purpose?
I personally, and it's speculation, I think they were functional. I think they did something. I think they're all broken now. They don't work anymore. I think they were a functional device. What that is, I don't know. There's lots of theories out there. A guy named Chris Dunn, a good friend of mine, a very good author, engineer. He really has moved this whole field forward in a lot of ways when it comes to ancient precision and technology.
Yeah.
He has a theory that it's like the Giza power plant. His theory does explain all of the elements of the pyramid. He used it to correctly predict what was behind Gatenbrink's door, which is one of those little things in one of the shafts in the Great Pyramid.
Can you explain this to us?
Yeah, so there's really weird aspects to the Great.
These are not functional, by the way.
These are your bracelets?
Yeah.
You know, like clang them together?
Yeah. Oh,
Dynastic Egyptians, not that functional.
Exactly. Dynastic Egyptians did not get it, dude.
Yeah.
The ancient Civ ones
Looks
would've-
great, though.
Yeah, they understand visuals, for sure.
Yeah.
They did.
Okay.
Yeah, so Gatenbrink's door, well, there's these strange features in there, right? You've got
So we're inside the Great Pyramid.
So you go in, there's 3 chambers, right?
Yeah.
There's a subterranean chamber that's down way below it in the bedrock with a shaft that goes through the pyramid.
Can we access that? Because I don't think I went inside. I don't know if I went down.
So not unless you do like a special permission. Every time we rent it out for 2 hours, they open a lot for us.
Oh,
We go
wow.
in there. So if you go in on a tourist ticket, you can go into like the Grand Gallery and up into the King's Chamber.
Yeah,
that's where most people go.
Yeah.
There's also a chamber below that called the Queen's Chamber. Now, both the so-called King and Queen's Chamber have these shafts, right? So there's the ones in the King's Chamber go to the outside. We know this because at some point, you know, some of these crazy British guys were rolling cannonballs down them, and they ended up in the King's Chamber. Like, that connects.
Oh, wow.
So
They just found cannonballs in the tomb and they were like...
well, they were just like, there's an opening. We think it might have been on the shaft. Let's find out.
Oh,
Yeah, they're probably damaged. I mean, there's rods, there's explorations of these shafts. There's like big, long steel rods that they've tried to probe them with. But the ones in the Queen's Chamber are more interesting because they don't go to the outside. They terminate somewhere inside the structure. Now, this is like a 4 to 6 inch square shaft, right?
Wait.
It's
4 to 6
It's
inch.
this big. It's how the hell do you make that? It has to be made when you're building the structure. Like it has to be planned. We don't know where they go, but we sent robots down them, and it turns out they go to what looks like a little door. There's a little door at the end. It's a limestone plug, and it looks like it's got. If you go to like Gatenbrink's door, maybe there's pictures of it there. I don't know, but Gatenbrink, yeah, that's it there. Well, that's after they drilled through it. So that actually. And on the door are these two, what they say are copper handles, but one of them's eroded more than the other. It's almost like it's an anode and cathode, like it may have been part of some sort of function.
Like a fucking battery?
Yeah, something like that. So part of Chris Dunn's theory, that's it there. So this is what's at the end of this shaft.
Get the fuck out of here.
And then eventually...
Like a socket.
Yeah, it's like a cycle. Well, those little copper things that are on there. But
No, the hole they
drilled it.
Okay.
You see the drill bit there.
Yeah.
So Chris Dunn, anyway, so he explains all of these features of the pyramid in his Giza power plant theory. And using his theory, before they drilled through the hole, he said, what they're going to find is another void and another little door. And they drilled through the hole, they drilled through this wall, and guess what they found?
Another
void and another
fucking door.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
So I think he was onto something.
And again, it lines up with your theory. It's too advanced for it not to be functional.
Yeah, there's no people say like, oh, this is where the soul would have escaped and gone up towards like this is nonsense.
And then to your point about
achievement.
building a pyramid just in that shape is the most functional to build. This is a functional thing. That's why we're going to build it in a pyramid shape.
100%.
Yeah.
That is fucked.
And they haven't drilled
This
past
battery theory?
They didn't drill past the second door.
No, as far as well, so no, there's a lot of nonsense going on about this for a long time. Like Gaten Brink sent his robot up the wrong shaft as well. He went and had a look in there, and Zahiwas threw him out of Egypt, and so there's been a lot of intrigue. There's a dark, like, there's all sorts of stories when you dive into Egyptology, in particular in the last, let's say, 30, 40 years, of what's gone on in these pyramids and on these sites, and about who's done what where. There's a lot of stories that all revolve around certain particular characters that have been in charge of some antiquities departments in Egypt.
Can you speak to the politics of why you can't start just excavating more of these shafts?
It's controlled by the Council of Antiquities. It used to be called the Supreme Council of Antiquities in Egypt.
Very
and
proper.
for a long time, a guy named Zahiwas was in charge of that. And this is, this comes back to the labyrinth story as well that we
might order a
mentioned
pizza
before,
later,
or
honestly.
we talked about before. And they really tightly control what goes on the sites, right? So you can't just roll up there and say, hey, I want to dig. The way that works is you have to partner with the council to do anything. And part of that is also they will want to know what your purpose is, what are you trying to find, and then they get to control the release of information at the end of it. So typically what happens is you have institutions like universities from France or Belgium, Austria, America, wherever, Britain, they have access to a particular site to do research in a certain way, and then that information is very slowly released whenever the Egyptian authorities deem it necessary to do so.
Why are they so protective of this theory of history? Because science. Why are the people who are
That's their claim to fame, my boy. That's all they got.
I guess, but to me, science is constantly disproving other science.
They don't give a fuck about science. They give a fuck about, like, yo, we're Egyptian. These pyramids are fire. Everybody loves these pyramids. We made them. And if this dickhead comes over there and goes, nah, it was some other people 30,000 years ago. You just bumped in on it. Yeah. They're like, man, shut the fuck up. I'm not going to let you discredit our whole shit.
I guess in my mind, they're still Egyptian, and it would still be like, yo, we survived motherfucking apocalypse. We came back. Yeah. We're still here.
There's a good argument to that. But I think they might look at it like, man, we didn't really do shit since back in the day.
It's not even necessarily Egyptian that's driving this too. It's kind of mainstream Egyptology and
also, they don't want to take the L. And also, I'm sure there's a religious component, which is like, you know, if you're dating the world, 6,000 years ago, and then you come in and it's 50,000 years. It's 100,000 years.
Yeah, million.
Yeah. Oh, it operates a bit like a religion, to be honest. And unfortunately, there's a lot of domains of science that suffer from that type of embedded, dogma to one extent. And it does tie back to these. Essentially, what's history, right? It's a story that you cobble together from a collection of incomplete facts. Now, when more new facts come up, and Younger Dryas and all this new scientific work, we should be taking that into account. But the problem arises when it starts to pull the rug out of the people that have really set what that story is. And honestly, the story of history and civilization hasn't changed for around 100 years. It still hasn't changed even with Göbekli Tepe. We still say, well, civilization started 6,000 years ago with the Sumerians, then the Egyptians, and then the Greeks and Romans, Chinese, all this other stuff.
Sesquipedalian.
Is there a framework here for how this could be conducting energy and power and what that power is used for?
Chris Dunn's Giza power plant theory takes into account all of this stuff.
You're such a sesquipedalianist.
I'm not an expert on it, but it has a lot to do with acoustics. The Grand Gallery has a bunch of these high voltage resonators in it. There's a really interesting theory. There's like different fluids and chemicals used in these shafts. There's a lot to it, and there's a lot of evidence for it as well. Like those shafts in the Queen's Chamber, for example, I mean, they don't even come out into the Queen's Chamber. They terminate like 6 inches from the wall. So there was a guy running around like literally tapping on the wall. He's like, oh, that sounds a bit different behind there. So they get a sledgehammer and they bust the wall open. They find the shafts. Like there's nothing. And when they first found the Queen's Chamber, by the way, it was covered in like 6 inches of these crystals that may have been the byproduct of some sort of chemical reaction. And in fact, I've got in here, actually, I shouldn't have gone in there, but they've been doing these experiments. So they unlock one of these gates. There's like a shaft and a little grotto area that goes in, because there's this alcove in the Queen's Chamber, but you can go right into the masonry behind it and it opens up into a little grotto area. I crawled in there and I filmed, and you can still find chunks of this crystal and all these weird growths that are, because they cleaned it all up and carved it all off when they cleaned up the inside of the pyramid. But there's a lot of this weird evidence, like something else was going on.
And what is his theory as to what this power could have been used for?
Some form of energy.
Just fucking shit.
I don't know. Some sort of microwave energy that they could have used if they had a receiver for it. They could have done it. Essentially, they think it may be coming from like this harmonic tone or this generation. It comes from the earth. It's a lot of complex theories on it. I don't know. Like I think his theory is the best one that we have that explains it with our tech. My personal opinion is I think it's probably broader than that. I think we don't quite understand what it's for, but I do think it was functional.
Can you explain this resonance theory that you shared? I think it was on the concrete podcast that you did.
Right. So yeah, I mean, there's one thing you find when you go in here. You would have found this when you went into the King's Chamber. It's insanely resonant, right? It's just like this. The acoustics in there are off the charts.
Yeah.
And there is, you know, it could be coincidence.
It's also very underwhelming. Which makes me feel like it wasn't a chamber.
The chamber?
The chamber itself, you're in there, you're like, oh, this is just...
It's like genius. I'm laughing more at your
inspiring view of the pyramids
your
on the
input
outside.
than
and
the
then you get
response.
into this King's Chamber, right?
Yeah, it's a box.
It's a box.
Yeah.
So
but it is made up of like 70-ton granite monoliths.
There's no question. Like the feat in order to
anthropomorphize
execute placing these 70-ton granite blocks around it is very special.
That is not.
But when you look at the grandiosity of like the dynastic Egyptians, it's not reflected in this room in any way. And if that was the king's room, like for a king, then I think it'd be a little different. It makes way more sense to me that this is a power factory, because that looks like the source of the power, or the battery's hooked up, or whatever it is. That to me makes way more sense. Because if I'm the king and that's the room you made me, you're dead.
Do we know if granite?
You know what I mean? I'm not dying here, motherfucker. I need more shit.
Yeah.
And it is just barren. It's empty.
We'll bury you here.
Tomb right there.
It's functional ass place.
All right, guys, we're gonna take a break for a second because today's episode is sponsored by Saving
Yeah,
Gas
honestly.
Money. Think about that. Think about that. You go buy something online, there's always that little box that says, do you have the promo code? Do you have the coupon code? Is there a way for you to save money? And you never do. Let's just be honest, you never do. Well, you know what? You can't. And you can without actually doing anything. Honey, okay, is a browser extension that's gonna do it all for you. That's right, it scours the internet for all the coupon codes that are available for the thing that you need to buy. All you have to do is use it. It's free for you to use. All you have to do is use it, and you save money on the things you're already gonna buy online. I don't even need to convince you to do this. You're gonna go buy a pair of sneakers, you use the Honey browser extension, and then boom, you save some money if there's a coupon code out there. It is that simple. And also, Honey doesn't just work on desktops, it works on your iPhone too. Just activate it on Safari on your phone and save on the go. So if you don't already have Honey, you could be straight up missing out. And by getting it, you'll be doing yourself a solid and supporting this show. Get PayPal Honey for free at joinhoney.com/flagrant. That's joinhoney.com/flagrant. Now let's get back to the show. All right, guys, we're gonna take a break for a second because let's be honest, some of y'all dumbasses have probably gotten injured, hurt yourself.
Dude, I've learned so much tonight
you could have made
from ChatGPT and you and your questions.
You hurt yourself on a job. You hurt yourself because of the job's negligence. You hurt yourself because of someone driving in a stupid manner like Shifty. You hurt yourself for many different reasons, but it wasn't your fault. And you know what? You didn't get the money that you deserved, and Morgan & Morgan is gonna help make that happen. And you know what? They're not gonna even get paid unless they get you your money. Think about that. They're so confident if they take on your case that they're gonna get you breaded up, they could get you breaded up, that they don't even want money unless you make money. Think about that. Morgan & Morgan is America's largest injury firm. They have over 100 offices nationwide, more than 800 lawyers with over $15 billion to cover for clients. Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record fighting to get you full and fair compensation. Submitting an injury claim with Morgan & Morgan is so easy. It's more like using an app than hiring a lawyer, okay? You submit a claim with Morgan & Morgan, okay? It's basically ordering takeout. That's how simple it is. Morgan & Morgan, you are going to be taken care of. So if you're ever injured, you can check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/flagrant or dial #law. That's #529 from your cell phone. That's For the People, forthepeople.com/flagrant or #law, #529 from your cell. Now let's get back to the show.
Do we know if granite has any functional properties that could be?
Yeah, it's piezoelectric. It's a conductor. It's piezoelectric. If you hit it with enough pressure, it generates electricity. There's a lot of quartz content in the granite. I've done experiments with guys. We've actually seen different electrical conductivity properties between granite, basalt, and limestone. They have different properties. So you see these types of stones lined up and sites made of these different types of stones that have these different electromagnetic properties to them. I think there's possibilities. I think that's where we should be experimenting and doing work to try and figure it out.
Does it make, is there evidence of cities close to every one of these pyramids? Because that makes sense that if it's the power plant for the city, right? But if they're just out there in the middle of nowhere and there's no city around it, then it doesn't, the power plant theory kind of like goes away.
We don't know. The city's probably built on top of the remnants of older cities. I mean, you see this Cusco and other places too.
Yeah.
I mean, but so each of those pyramids, that's the interesting thing about those pyramid sites is that they are all, I call them like the Sun Belt. From each one, you can see the next one. So starting up at Abu Rawash, up on the hill, you can see Giza, then you can look down to see, you know, Abu Sir, to Saqqara, to Dashur, and you see each other on the horizon. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe they're all connected. There's been rumors of underground infrastructure in between these sites. I've heard that story.
Get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Connecting all the...
Potentially. I've heard that story. I don't know.
Which would make sense functionally if you need to power the whole city or whatever.
So now, something so monumental as the pyramids of Giza and the fact that perhaps maybe other people built them and then they were discovered by new people and then those people died out and discovered by new people. Why was it eventually just left so barren for so long?
Well, it was used as a quarry. Eventually, it's like, you know what? You know what's easier than digging up stone from the ground? Taking the stone from this damn thing.
And quarries, just for anybody listening, it's just a sourcing place for stone.
Yeah, there were sources of quarries. People would just take stone from it. Like people lived like, up until about probably less than 100 years ago. People lived at these sites in Egypt, the temples, the pyramid places. Before they became these tourist attractions, people would like pitch their tents and they'd cut holes in the stone to tie the camels up. Donkeys or whatever, and they'd live there. I mean, same as all the temples. People just live there, turn into markets. I mean, we blackened the ceilings of these temples from cook fires.
Oh, really?
For generations. And then eventually the government came along and says, you know what, you guys get all the F out. We're going to turn these into tourist attractions. So in some ways, like we've inherited these sites today. We use them as tourist attractions. We've renovated them as tourist attractions.
You would think that the neighborhood
Maybe the Egyptians did the same.
Around the pyramids would be like Central Park property. You know what I mean? Like, it is not. Like, there are people out there who probably live in like really like lower income homes that have a perfect view of the most amazing thing that humans have ever created.
My buddy Yusuf, he lives in Nazlet El Samam, which is the village near the Sphinx entrance, and he's got his shop there, and his little balcony's on the 5th floor of this building, and we sit out there and play music or whatever and just stare right at the Sphinx and the pyramids. Like, that's the view he grew up with. It's insane.
Wow.
Yeah, it is cool. And they're trying to knock it all down now. The government wants to go in there and
build hotels.
They want to
do all this
hotels.
Yeah.
But it is really interesting. So it must have been like so normalized to them that they wouldn't try to build around it. That's what's peculiar to me.
You know, it's a roof over people's heads in a lot of places, and these, particularly the temples, man. They don't care, and they'd cut holes in it, and they'd take. A lot of people would scoop out, they'd get a blade and scoop out material and take it as some sort of, you know, healing powder or whatever. Or you're taking a piece from the gods and stuff like that. So
right. But the people that actually built this, how advanced they were, there's no necessarily like a theory as to why they went away or why they left or were they killed or.
I don't know. I mean, the stories they tell was cataclysm. That's how all of these ancient stories come back to cataclysm.
Not Younger Dryas for them, or maybe it was.
We don't know. We don't know. Well, let's put it this way. So the Egyptians themselves, I don't think you can separate the dynastic Egyptians from what you might call the builder culture, right? The advanced culture. The Egyptians themselves